It's no secret to anybody here today that we're in the middle of a opiate epidemic. Several years ago, I think if we were having a conversation like this, people wouldn't understand what we all understand now. It is definitely an epidemic stage. To put it in perspective, here in the state of Missouri, based on the most recent statistics available, there are approximately 16.5 deaths per 100,000 people in the state of Missouri, which is slightly higher than the national average. The most significant change that we've seen over the last 5 years is the rate of overdose deaths involving the synthetic opiate called fentanyl. In the last 5 years, 5 years ago, the reported fentanyl overdose deaths were 56, and last year that number jumped up 11-fold to 618. We are seeing more and more overdose deaths. Practically all of them here in St. Charles County involve some combination of opiates. One of those is nearly always fentanyl. Today I'd like to talk about the efforts of the St. Charles County Police Department really over the last 36 hours in particular, and talk more broadly about the efforts that take place each day here in our community. The first case I'd like to highlight, I'll take them in reverse order. Last night, well, early this morning, I guess about 3:30 this morning, officers patrolling I-70 were able to identify a commercial moving vehicle that had a back portion that had a door locked by the latch. That vehicle committed a series of traffic violations. The officer initiated a traffic stop and asked a few questions, and it became clear to the officer that the driver was not being completely truthful. The driver and the passenger were separated. They gave conflicting stories, which further piqued the officer's suspicion. He asked for consent to search the back of the rental truck. Consent was given, and the story that was being told was that these folks were helping move a family member from across the country. But when the officer observed the somebody's phone's ringing. Okay, I can answer it if you want me to, but I wouldn't know what to say. Brian, I'll let you do that.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There you go.
The officer again searched the cargo portion of the moving truck, and he saw several items of furniture which looked almost like junk, just beaten down. Not something that you would typically undertake the effort to move across the country. One of the other things he saw was a large air compressor that had a large tank. He approached the air compressor, and this was really good police work. He just knocked with his knuckle on the tank portion of the compressor. The sound that came out didn't sound like you would think it would. It had more of a thud sound as opposed to a ring sound. The vehicle was then impounded and taken back, where it was discovered that inside the air compressor was a significant amount of heroin and cocaine. Specifically, I can tell you there were 9 kilograms of cocaine and 2 kilograms of fentanyl, which obviously is a synthetic version of heroin. The approximate street value for the drugs that were confiscated was over $410,000. To put this in perspective, our lab professionals here tell us that 1 pound of fentanyl could kill more than 200,000 people. 2 pounds could kill more than 400,000 people. This is a significant amount of drugs that were taken off the streets, and these officers are good at what they do, and they're doing these things every day. But this is one that I think we want to highlight because, again, the epidemic in our community it's not unlike the epidemic in other communities. So perhaps the actions of these officers just early this morning saved hundreds, if not thousands of lives. The other case I'd like to highlight is similar in nature, also took place in the early morning hours of yesterday. Again, officers conducted a traffic stop of a black Honda Civic on I-70, again for committing several traffic violations. Again, there was a driver and a passenger. This one was not unique. The window was rolled down, and out of the window emanated an odor of marijuana, which instantly gives officers probable cause to engage in a further search. In the course of that search, the officers uncovered just under 2 pounds of heroin. So again, those all within the last approximately 36 hours right here in St. Charles County on I-70 in our community. We have reason to believe that these individuals, though unrelated, the cases are unrelated to one another, all the individuals are part of larger criminal organizations that are involved in the trafficking of drugs. Just so happened that they happened to come through St. Charles County and they didn't make it out. The destination was I should say, originated on the West Coast, and the final destination was closer to the East Coast at a major heroin distribution center. I want to say that oftentimes, recently, officers have come under attack for the civil asset forfeiture program that we participate in with the federal government. One thing to keep in mind, this illustrates why that program is so valuable to the community, not just to us, not just to the police department, but to the community at large. So we know this. We know that the eastbound traffic usually is carrying the drugs. The westbound traffic is usually carrying the proceeds from the sale of those drugs. Our officers are out there on both sides trying to, A, take away the cash, which is going back to the cartels. That's how the cartels get hit, is the cash. They don't really care about the drugs. It's the cash is what they care about. Our community and those other communities around us are who care about the drugs. So not only are we taking the money away from the cartels, but we're taking the drugs back from the community. So with that, I'd like to introduce County Executive Steve Ellman to say a few words, and then we'll entertain questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I can't add a whole lot to what Tim has said except to say amen. And also to congratulate Captain Tiefenbrunn and also Captain Hunt. And you've heard Tim talk about the officers. At some point, I'd like to congratulate them as well, but we really can't say who they are because those crime organizations that Tim talked about would love to know who they are, because this is a tremendous hit on their profits. And I just want to thank them, even though we can't identify them, for doing some really good police work that is going to keep these drugs off the street, away from our kids, and hopefully help do something to slow down this opioid epidemic that Tim has been working on for, the last 5 years probably,
At least.
in several different ways. And you know, we have the people in custody now, and thanks to the police department, but now your job is just beginning. And you know, it's very important that we support our prosecutor and his office. They have a tough job now. Not only having caught these people, we need now put them where they belong and see what they can tell us to help make sure more people aren't coming through our county and bringing this poison with them. So, good luck, Tim.
Thank you, Steve. Formally, I would just like to announce the charges. The first case that I described to you, we have two co-defendants, Taniqua Bosley and Adam Hutchison, both of whom have been charged with drug trafficking. They are in custody, and their bond was just set just a few minutes ago, as a matter of fact. $50,000, no cash, I'm sorry, no 10% cash only. And the second case that I described to you, Diana Ochoa and Jose Ochoa Jr. were also charged with drug trafficking. They too are in custody, and their bond is set at $100,000 cash only, no 10%. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Where are they from?
Pardon me?
Do we know where they're from?
Yes, we know that the Hutchison and Bosley, they took a plane flight from Ohio out to the West Coast, Los Angeles. We know that the Ochoas originated from Los Angeles. There's conflicting information that they've given officers, and officers are right now trying to verify that and vet that information to figure out exactly whether they have the full truth.
What is their relationship, the Ochoas?
Mother and son, and then the other two, we don't have any specific relationship that we've been identified.
Can you say and spell the Hutchison and their two names?
Sure. Adam Hutchison, it's Hutchinson, and Taniqua Bosley, that's Tinikqua Bosley. And we have charging documents and probable cause statements that we can give you when we finish things up here.
Awesome.
What was the value of the second confiscation?
The second confiscation,
The one that you named.
pardon me?
It was reverse order, so the second one that you named was actually the initial.
Correct. Yeah, so that was just under 2 pounds of heroin. That had an approximate street value of $35,000.
And what was the time of that?
This was just after midnight on, I guess it would have been Monday, yesterday, President's Day.
Can you speak to, obviously with 70, this is a corridor, our area has kind of got a lot of these highways and corridors that reach all different parts of the country. Can you speak to how the police department is looking for vehicles that could be participating in this trafficking of drugs? I mean, what can you talk to us about the efforts that the men and women of this department and other departments are doing when they're watching these highways, looking for these traffickers?
Sure. Well, we do know, as you referenced, we have 2 major interstates that come right through our county. We know that that is a highway for drug trafficking. Again, the drugs come from the west, head to the east, cash comes back from the east to the west. That much we know. In terms of what the officers are looking for, first of all, we have 3 officers who are dedicated just to that assignment. These are routine traffic violations. Once a routine traffic violation is observed by an officer, that gives them the right to pull that vehicle over. And then from there, it's really the expertise that these guys have gained over years and years doing this day in and day out. They ask the right questions. They pay attention to the right clues, the scents that they smell coming out of the vehicle. All those things put together are what they use. And they do a terrific job at it. It sounds easy when I sit up here and describe it, but it's not.
Can you talk to us about what we're seeing?
Yes, let's see, I don't want to misspeak. This is from the seizure from just this morning, so what, approximately 12 hours ago. We have, I believe here, let's see, we have 2 kilos of fentanyl, and the rest is cocaine. So the cocaine would be on the brown bags, is that right? And then the fentanyl.
So that like brick, how much is that? I don't know anything about a kilo.
That's it's a kilo. It's about 2 pounds.
Okay. And that's, you mentioned, how many people could that kill?
Yeah, so 2 pounds of fentanyl could kill over 400,000 people.
And you've got 4 there.
Correct, yeah, you're right.
Sorry, I guess my one question is, this doesn't look like a lot. It obviously in street value and in the amount of damage it can do to the public is bad in a large amount. These are 4 people off the street. Is that able to make an impact when there's just so much of this popping up across the country, across the world, and coming into our communities? What kind of impact can it have?
You know, it's a fair question. We hope it has an impact. We know that if we can continue to take not only the drugs, but also the proceeds from the sale of those drugs, that's where it hurts. That's where it hurts these criminal organizations. Now, again, is it going to stop them from doing what they do? No, it's not going to stop them. But hopefully, this is one small effort here in our community that it's going to make an impact, like a ripple in a pond.
Most of the times when these guys get caught, is it based on these traffic violations, or is it, tips that there's something coming through? How does that usually work?
Occasionally there are tips, but the vast majority of times it is some traffic violation that's committed. And again, these officers know what they're looking for. And they may initiate 30 traffic stops in a day and never see anything that would rise to the level of suspicion on this level. But they are trained and they are expert enough to know what they see when they see it. And that's how we get results like this.
And you have 3 officers, you say, that are dedicated just to this type of work.
That's right.
One thing I thought was interesting that you talked about was the cash aspect. You said that officers can pick up on things like scents coming from the car, you know, when it comes to drugs. But you talk about cash is what really hurts the people that are, you know, bringing this stuff over the border and, you know, into the community. Can you talk about, is it harder for them to catch, you know, the people with cash when they're, you know, when they're coming west with it?
I think it is harder. Again, I'm not out there doing it, so these guys could explain it better than I could, but unfortunately we can't have them come up here and show their faces on television. The thing with the drug activity, typically there is an odor that's going to be more detectable. It's a lot more of an investigative journey when you're looking for just cash proceeds. But you're not looking for cash. I mean, usually you find cash when you're looking for something else. That's almost always how it happens, but it is more difficult.
What does a seizure of this size mean to this department? You had spoken to what seizures equate to money to a department, right? And so kind of explain, what does a seizure of this scale mean to?
Well, this type of seizure doesn't have any financial impact. It would be, if it was a seizure of cash, which were drug proceeds, that's a different scenario. There's an asset sharing program with the Department of Justice that our police department, our prosecutor's office, and many around the state participate in. And in those circumstances, there's a process by which a percentage of that money can be turned back to the participating departments. But that's not what we have here today.
And these will be prosecuted in state courts?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question for you. One of the things you mentioned is that one of those cars was stopped from the odor of marijuana. This is a sort of a larger scale question, given where we're at in a state level with medical marijuana and neighboring state of recreational. How do you foresee that changing how police departments can stop vehicles? When we're talking about a smell of marijuana, there very well could be a legal medical marijuana patient. Can you speak to that at all?
I can, and that's a fair question because we've talked about that ourselves. I think, first of all, with medical marijuana, you can't smoke in your car. Now, if you talk about somebody coming over from a neighboring state where it is legal, it's hard to say, did they smoke it where it was legal versus where it's illegal? I think the answer to that is we just have to be a little bit more aggressive in the investigative techniques, ask the right questions, pay attention to the right clues. But yeah, it's going to be, it's a different world for us. There's no question about that now that marijuana is legal recreationally just next door to us and medically here in our own state.
Have you seen many cases of people coming back from Illinois and you guys?
Not yet, not yet. There have been a few. We anticipate more, but not that many yet.
Is that something that is being talked about from in terms of all the different departments, whether it's in St. Charles County or on a larger scale, especially with medical marijuana? While they can't smoke it in the car, they could possess it in the car, could have just smoked it. Does that complicate things when we're talking about, you know, trying to stop drug traffickers like this? Yes.
We've talked about this. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, we had a lengthy conversation about just what do we do. And I would be untruthful if I said we have the answers. We don't. We don't have all the answers. But it's just, again, you got to just be very effective and pointed in your investigations. And we're gonna learn as we go. In some ways, how to you know, approach this new world.
You talked about the program with the DOJ. You guys, you know, turning stuff over to them, they'll give you a percentage back in return. How does it work when, you know, there's a seizure like this, or say, you know, cash? You know, how do you go about determining whether or not, you know, this is a federal case and you're gonna, you know, turn this over to the DOJ, or you're gonna try it here, you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's no black and white formula for that, but generally speaking, a case will be turned over to the feds if the officers believe that there is an interstate nexus, some sort of interstate criminal activity that crosses state lines. The federal government is, in those situations, almost always much better equipped to prosecute those cases. So if it is one of those, we still have to be able to show that we could file a felony here in state court, but that, given the circumstances, the matter is best handled by the federal government. We can seize the money at that point. There's a judicial process that takes place immediately. I think it's 72 hours after the seizure. The person from whom the money was seized has an opportunity to object to it, and if the person does object to it, then it's scheduled for a court hearing in front of a judge, in front of a circuit judge here in our county, and the judge makes a determination as to whether or not that money should be turned over to the federal government or returned back to the person who claims to have possessed it.
So this still could end up being a federal case down?
This one won't.
This one
won't,
Okay.
no. But when you're just talking about cash proceeds,
Okay, gotcha.
or some combination of drugs and cash, that's the analysis that we have to go through.
Gotcha.
But what the defendants say when they were found and stuff.
Yeah, this case is no different than probably 95% of them. When the illegal narcotics are found, or in some cases, the cash is found, the officer asks the driver about it. They say, I don't know whose it is. That doesn't belong to me. I think 2018 we had 46 seizures of cash that were related to drug activity, and of those 46, one person filed an objection. The rest did nothing. And we're talking about some significant chunks of change. Anything else?
So they claim cash, they won't claim the drugs.
That's right.
Was there any chance that any of this could have wound up on the streets of St. Charles County?
There's a chance. I think, our educated guess is that it was headed towards a larger distribution market further east of us. But yeah, anything's possible. If it's here, you just never know.
While we have here, is there any update to charges at the Lake St. Louis crash with the driver that killed the 4 people on Friday?
The update I have is that, unfortunately, there's nothing new to report. We are waiting for the toxicology results to come back. We're also waiting for the accident reconstruction to take place, and that's going to take several weeks at a minimum.
Were there indications on the scene of any impairment?
On the
Pickup driver?
I'm not prepared to go into that right now, Brian. It's too early on in the investigation. I haven't seen the reports. I've just talked to the troopers involved, so that's about all I can say about that. Okay, thank you.